Welcome to Authentic Educators, a podcast by teachers for teachers. My name is Dave Brown, and while this is episode 3 of the podcast, it's actually the first episode that Cody and I ever recorded and the inspiration for the podcast in the first place. Today, we talk about Cody's favorite lesson ever, a lesson that he's done in the past to hook his students before reading Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible. The Crucible is a story about hysteria during the Salem witch trials, and it's an allegory about McCarthyism or the Red Scare in the United States in the 1950s. Before introducing this play to his classes, Cody plays a game with his students called Mafia, and it's a really fun game if you've never played it before. It creates an environment of finger pointing and intrigue that allows his students to get frustrated, have fun, and eventually see the bigger picture. One idea that I love about this lesson is its novelty and memorability, and maybe something our non-English teacher listeners can take away from this episode is the importance of anticipatory activities and games or any unique event in the classroom that can connect to the curriculum. It's a great hook. And Cody's been doing this activity for years. I actually borrowed it from him and used it when I used to teach the Crucible back in my days as an English teacher. And over this past summer, Cody and I were having a conversation, and he said to me that he wished he could share this idea with more people and hear from others about the great ideas that they do. Cody and I were lucky that we've kept up a good professional relationship since we work together, and we've been able to hear a lot of the great things that we each do, but we realize we don't get to hear a lot of the great stuff that other folks do. And this conversation we had, in particular about this Mafia lesson that he just loves and wants to share with more people, that conversation was the genesis for this podcast. And so we can't wait to talk to more teachers and professionals about what they do in the classroom. Our next episode actually will be the first episode with a guest, and our first guest is a really special one. He is maybe the best teacher I've ever had in my life, Tom Stecker. So Tom Stecker will be joining us, and we can't wait to tell you about his incredible career, and we'll be talking about social and emotional learning. And in general, we can't wait to talk to more teachers. So if you think you have a great lesson or some great practice that you do in your classroom that's worthy of sharing, please email us at authenticedpod@gmail.com. We'd love to talk. But for now, let's get to Cody's and my conversation about his favorite lesson of all time. I can't wait for you to hear a conversation about Mafia. Here it is. So, Cody, this whole idea for the Authentic Educators podcast, a lot of that began with you wanting a venue to share. It's really one lesson in particular, and then that you have done that you think was meaningful and you've wished you could share it with other people. But I might be speaking for you, but I think you never had what you felt was the right venue to share it with other people.
Yeah, I mean, in 17 years of teaching, there have been a lot of lessons I've loved, but this is, by far the lesson that I look forward to more than anything. In this current year that I'm teaching, there isn't the right unit for it, and I very, very much miss it. Mm-hmm. I would love at some point to talk to one of my former students to hear their perspective on it, but it's one of those lessons that I wish that I had when I was a student, and it combines my career of being a teacher, but also my biggest passion, which is that I love to play games, and I love to be competitive, and I love to have fun with my friends. And so that to me is why this lesson is amazing.
So talk about the lesson. So what was the class? What was the unit? And then you can get into what the actual lesson was.
So the unit was a study essentially of the Crucible by Arthur Miller. And I was trying to think of a way to engage the students. Typically one of my go-tos is a value line or anticipation guide statement. Mm-hmm. And those are great, and I love doing them. But I sort of saw this opportunity with the Crucible that I wanted to jump on. Thinking reflectively, I think that this lesson could be done for anybody who's teaching a unit that has any of the themes of abuse of power, scapegoating, fear, paranoia. But really, any of you out there that are listening that teach the Crucible, it's a slam dunk. And so The mindset was I wanted to create a fun environment where the kids in a low-stakes environment experience just a flavor of what folks back in Salem were experiencing with those themes that I mentioned, a few seconds ago. And so I had this light bulb moment where I was like, oh, let's play Mafia, which is a card game, a role-playing hidden identity game that I played on the ski club bus as a high school student. I played it to and from crew regattas in college, and something that it's a lot of fun. Are you familiar with the game?
I'm familiar. The aces are typically a mafia. Kings are the sheriff. Is the queen the nurse, right?
So those details are all flexible.
Yeah.
Like the basic concept, if you're unaware of it. One, I mean, you could just go on Google or YouTube, and I'm sure there's like a 3-minute video,
Yeah.
but you basically get a card that tells you what role you are. And the premise of the game is...
And so people know it's a playing card, like a deck of 52.
Yeah, a deck of playing cards. And so that's all you need. And then you post the rules on your whiteboard. And you get a card, and that determines what role you are. And so there are two teams. There's a good team and a bad team. The Mafia is the bad team, and then the good team are just regular citizens. And then there's all different roles. But for this version in class, I try to keep it simple, and I play with somebody who's the sheriff or police, and then somebody who is the nurse trying to save folks. So you explain this whole thing, and you'll be surprised. A lot of kids play this at summer camps or some version of it. And so you're typically going to have, maybe 15% of the class or 20% and it's important that you do this cold, right? Like, hey, we're going to start this unit on the Crucible.
Right.
You're like, hey, we're playing a game today.
A cold open is a powerful hook.
It's good. Right. And if you really line it up, you do it on a Friday or a Monday where you're just going into or coming out of the weekend. And so you explain this whole thing, and the kids are all jazzed about it because you're playing a game for the entire period.
Right.
You do need like a 50-minute period for it. You could probably squeeze it into 30 or 40 minutes, but the longer the period, the better. And so you describe all this thing, and if you're with a big class, you kind of randomize, you try to get like 10 to 15 kids. You have some kids being audience members, which is part of the best part of this.
Oh, because
right.
They're in on what
they're
you're
in
about to
on,
explain.
or they're not in on it. You can decide whether they're in on it or not in on it. And what it is you explain the game, and then before you deal out the cards, you have a preset deck of cards that doesn't have a single Mafia member in it. And
so again, a Mafia, you might say, number 2, if you get a card with a 2, you're Mafia.
Correct.
Or if you have an ace... you
can just pick a card, or you can pick, if you get a red card or a black card, you just pick it up.
Yep.
And the kids all want to be the evil card.
Yeah, they want to be the hitman.
They want to be the hitman, and you hand it all out, and what they don't realize is you've handed out a set of cards where there's not a single Mafia member in it. And so each round you go through, without going into excruciating detail, you say, all right, everybody go to sleep, and they put their heads down. And so the audience members that aren't playing, you can let them either pretend that they're playing and put their heads down, so they're trying to figure out the mystery too of who the Mafia members are, or they can watch the whole time, so they're in on it with you. And so you got to imagine, like, every kid's head's down. Mm-hmm. And you as the teacher have to kind of pick a kid randomly that's not the sheriff or the nurse, and you sort of vote them off in your mind as if the Mafia have done it.
Right.
Because, but no kids are Mafia.
A piece that's probably missing here is when everybody puts their heads down, you're almost the narrator.
Correct.
You're like storytelling.
Correct.
And you sort of invent things that are happening at night.
Or the kid goes missing or something, right? You don't want to get too intense being in the school setting. And then the sheriff and the nurse, they can both wake up one at a time when you tell them to. Mm-hmm. And the sheriff's job is to point at somebody as a way of figuring out if they're Mafia. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's no Mafia, so you're like, no Mafia, sorry. And you kind of you pantomime that to them. Or, put your thumb down, say not Mafia.
Right.
And then nurse gets to wake up and save somebody, including themselves. most nurses will selfishly save themselves, which means that if they're the target, they're not eliminated.
Right.
So then you say, all right, everybody wake up. All their heads pop up. And you come up with some sort of silly, ridiculous story and say, oh, Dave, they got you.
Yeah.
Which, of course, the key is that you are abusing your power as the narrator.
Yeah,
like
true.
You have picked this person. So they push their desk out of the circle, and then you say, all right, the 9 of you, the 11 of you, you can mix up the numbers. You need to vote somebody off. Mm-hmm. And here's where all the kids start accusing each other. Oh, well, John would have voted Dave off because they're best friends and they like to, whatever.
And you'll also hear, well, I heard a noise. I heard this person's desk squeak. And so they think that they were...
Yeah, Mr. Crook was talking in that direction.
Yeah.
So the Mafia... And it's all these, ridiculous, foolish reasons because there isn't a Mafia member. And when the kids are accused, they're all honestly saying...
Right.
I'm not the Mafia.
And some get indignant, some are confused, some are upset.
You have this whole range of emotions. And so if let's say you have 9 people remaining, all you need is 5 people to vote off. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they'll vote quickly and you're like, oh, that's 5. See you later, Sarah.
Right.
And Sarah, what? No, I'm not the Mafia. And then and it gets smaller and smaller. And so the key thing is if you try to implement this in class, you really only want to let the sheriff be up for about 2 rounds because they might come out and say, and they're allowed to say it, hey, I'm the sheriff.
Right. And
I know that Dave's innocent and so-and-so is innocent. But once the sheriff's gone, the sheriff can't talk anymore. Mm-hmm. So I'll usually eliminate the sheriff in the 2nd or 3rd round where somebody's removed so they can't keep identifying people as clean.
Yeah.
And you winnow it down till you eventually get to 3 people. And at this point, everybody else is an audience member and the suspense is rising.
Right.
And the intensity is because you're like, no, you're not. And I'll have kids yell at each other. I mean, not terribly yell at each other, but get pretty emotional.
No, high school kids they'll get into this kind of stuff.
Pretty animated.
And then you have the Spider-Man meme where they're each pointing at one another, right?
Correct, exactly. Yeah, they're all pointing at, and the key to this, right, if you're teaching a unit that's founded on the Crucible, you can probably have anticipated where I'm going here, right? All of the people in the Crucible who were killed as witches weren't witches. And so in the game, all the people that are accused and eliminated of Mafia members are never Mafia members.
Right.
And I have this one specific memory from about 8 or 9 years ago where I think I dumb-lucked chanced into having some of the most theatrical and animated and involved students remaining in it. And their hearts get broken. This one kid fell out of his chair on his knees and was like, no, with this very, very, and this student.
I do. I can picture it. Yeah.
You had him a couple of years after. I had him as a sophomore. And they kind of, the students feel pretty betrayed at times. And I tell them, look, this is going to be the only time where I'm going to outright lie to you. But I had to. Right, you had to experience what that felt like. Mm-hmm. Right, the people that we're about to study in this unit are going to be accused, and they're not just going to be kicked out of some silly game in your English class.
Right,
they're going to be either killed or have their lives ruined, or have a spouse murdered. Right, because of that. And I really think that by framing this whole introduction to the unit that way, it's brought so much buy-in, and teaching the Crucible or teaching a unit based upon justice where the Crucible is the primary text has been one of the most fulfilling units of my career. And I think it really goes back to that experience of playing that game to start.
Me hearing this, and by the way, that is actually something, I think you're the person who showed that to me, and I had maybe spent 3 or 4 years teaching American literature and used that very same intro, and I'm pretty much certain that I got it from you, and if I didn't get it from you,
I think I remember
I got it from somebody who got it from you.
Yeah, I just thought of the idea. It wasn't,
I
didn't find it on a website or anything. It was just this authentic moment where I'm I love games, how can I bring that into my classroom?
But I think there's something so transferable there, which is I think that the Salem witch trials is a really inherently interesting topic, but I'm also a 36-year-old person who loves history. Not every high school student, especially today, is going to be overtly, or let's say intrinsically motivated to learn about that, right?
Right.
But what
so you got to trick them.
Right. But yeah, you have this sort of novel event and this experience and this... especially dedicating 50 minutes of a period. Like some people might balk at that and say that's a lot of instructional time wasted, but it's absolutely not, because that might be the reason that the next 5 weeks weren't wasted, because you got bought in with the novelty of that activity. And I mean, so I'm going to ask a question, but one thing to lead into before that question is, I find a connection here is that if you can have some great experience that then leads into a unit, it's such a good way to hook kids and make the learning meaningful. This lesson, I don't know that it would work for every single subject out there, but that idea of a relevant experience would. But are there other lessons that you can think of, or units, where you feel like something like this could fit? There's one or two that come to mind for me.
So I think, clearly the best, most specific unit is be a unit where you're studying the Crucible in some way.
Yeah.
However, if you're a history teacher and you're studying, the Cold War, McCarthyism, right? That's, the Crucible is based upon that. So you don't have to be an English teacher. You could be a history teacher, or really, and I'm not thinking of any that come to mind immediately, but really,
I could think of,
any text with those themes.
You have Animal Farm, where there's this sort of fear of Snowball coming in the night when he, in reality, probably wasn't. So, I mean, and that's a direct sort of parallel to the Red Scare, and or it ties to fear of communism. And then Lord of the Flies comes to mind to me with this sort of fear of the beast. This sort of mental torment that the kids on the island go through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just find there's a lot of literature that has this thematic idea of fearing something that might not exist.
Fear, paranoia, hysteria.
Yeah, so I feel like some version of this lesson could work in a lot of real reading English language arts classrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, to me, it's the themes.
Yeah.
Right, because thinking back of the half dozen times or so I've taught this, it's, you create an environment where there's sort of this controlled hysteria, this controlled paranoia that you have created as a teacher. And I think you hit the nail on the head in creating an experience for a student.
Right.
Versus just disseminating information to them.
Right.
Right. All classes aren't such that you can do this on a daily basis. But if you can sprinkle in a couple of experiential moments, once a month or once a quarter, those are the moments that the kids are going to remember. And it's certainly the one that I remember, right? I'm telling you about it here, and how many lessons have I taught in my career, and this is the one that jumps to my mind as the...
If you're the guy teaching the lessons and this is what you remember, then I'm imagining then that's definitely the experience for the kids too. Cody, this is a great idea. And as we wrap up, are there any final thoughts you have about this, or anything left to share?
Not really. It's my favorite lesson that I've ever taught. I look forward to it whenever I get a chance. And if you can incorporate it or share it with somebody that that teaches something similar to what we've discussed, it's definitely doable for you. Well,
Cody, thank you so much. That
Appreciate
was another episode of Authentic Educators. You can find us at... Yeah, sorry for my gibberish there, but hey, I left it in. We're keeping it authentic. Cody and I, as I said, that was the first podcast episode that we recorded, and we're still figuring it out. But we cannot wait to be joined by Tom Stecker in our next episode. And again, in the meantime, thank you so much for listening. And reach out at authenticedpod@gmail.com if you have any great ideas to share with us. Can't wait to hear from you soon. Thanks.